Hello and welcome to another episode of Ram Chat. I'm Mariana Mancuso. Like many of you, I too have been concerned about the GOP's assault on voting rights, and with the growing rise of extremism within the Republican Party, I've spent a lot of days wondering how can we protect our democracy? Fortunately, today's Ram Chat between co-founder of Renew America Movement Miles Taylor and former Maryland Lieutenant Governor and Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Steele will discuss all of this and more when it comes to ensuring the guardrails of our democracy remain intact. Without further ado, Miles, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mariana. Appreciate it. And I'm delighted to welcome our guest today. Very excited about this conversation. We will dive right in. And Chairman, Governor, Michael, I'm going to call you all those things because as we joked about in the green room, I never know which honorific to give you. So I'm going to give you all of them.
It's all good.
We're excited to have you. Look, I mean, I hate to have us kick off with such heavy stuff, but here we are in 2021, and we're talking about voting rights. We're talking about protecting the fundamental right to vote, which appears to be under siege nationwide. I mean, I think now we're at almost half of US states have overhauled their voting laws after the 2020 election, and many of them not in a good way, in a way that makes voting harder. So there's a whole range of bills, which we'll get to in a little bit on Capitol Hill to deal with this. But from a high level, how do you view the problem right now, and how do we end up in this place?
Well, I think, well, first off, it's great to be with you, Miles, as always. I've been so proud and just incredibly impressed with what you and your partner, Evan McMullen, have been able to do to pull this movement together and to make it more than a movement, but make it something that has sound viability for a lot of Republicans around the country and independent voters as well, who are looking for a place to have the fullest expression of our democracy realized, and to push back on this counter narrative, which you've just addressed in your question about voting. It is such a sad state to see Republicans some 60, 70 years later now, standing in the schoolhouse doorstep, if you will, standing in the way of voting opportunities for Americans where we once were the champion of that very foundational right to access the ballot box, going back to not just, as Republicans like to know, we freed the slaves, okay? Yeah, but then the question is, what'd you do next? And we can look throughout 100+ years of history to see where the party moved the civil rights agenda forward, but suddenly calculated something different. And you see that manifest today in states largely led by Republican legislatures and governors, where they are so bereft of a message, so bereft of a policy. I mean, I'll give you an example. I'm still waiting for that healthcare policy, which we said we were going to repeal and replace Obamacare.
2 weeks. I think Trump was going to release it in 2 weeks.
Yeah. And then there's infrastructure, which now the Democrats command and control, as opposed to Republicans putting their imprimatur on such a policy. So bereft of ideas, bereft of a national narrative for governance, bereft of specific policy proposals that would underpin that governance, we have to resort to making it harder for people to access the ballot box. Why? Because you can't win any other way. And I think it's important for voters to understand exactly what this is right now. This is about 2024. 2020 is now in the rearview mirror, but it isn't. It was actually the starting point for this systematic takedown of our democratic system through the ballot box. And we saw that play out on January 6th. We've since seen it play out in what various states are doing. So we have a lot of work in front of us, those of us who are standing with democracy, to make sure people understand exactly what's at stake, why it's at stake, who the perpetrators are in this takedown of our democracy, and why it's important for Renew America and others out there to be on that front line.
Now, Governor, you of course ran the Republican National Committee. Was this even a front burner or a top 5 issue when you were chairman? And if not, how do we get back to that period where we're no longer debating rewriting the rules of the game, and we just go play the game?
Well, first off, to your first question, oh, hell no. There's no way under my watch we were going to systematically go in and start taking out people's right to vote. In fact, I have advocated since I was a county chairman here in Prince George's County for expanding the vote. I'm the chairman who articulated publicly we should make, and this is again 2009, 2010, that we should make voting election day a national holiday. We should move it from November to the spring. We should, if that doesn't work, let's then do it over a weekend. Let's give everybody an opportunity to vote. Let's invest. Maybe the federal government can create a partnership with the states to invest in sound, solid voting equipment in every jurisdiction around the nation. So I'm all about expanding the vote because I'm not afraid of what I believe in. I'm not afraid of what you believe in. You and I have had enough conversations to know we are simpatico on a whole host of issues that fundamentally underscore why we believe, a sort of, limited government, pro-enterprise, free market, standing with our allies around the world, identifying and pushing back up against our enemies and our adversaries around the world, and even here at home matters. And so if you're not afraid to make that expression of our values and ideas as part of the national conversation in town squares around the country, then you're not afraid of people voting. Because if you believe in those ideas, you firmly believe that when they hear them and they begin to value them, they'll support them with their vote. When you cannot make that case, then you have the problems that we see now. And how you get back to that, to your second point, is what you're doing and what many like you in the democracy space are doing is holding up the Constitution and saying, yeah, these words still matter. They still have value. In fact, I think I have my right here. Yeah, there we go. This is the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. This ish matters, folks. It's still, these words, while they may have been written by white men who had a lot of property and owned slaves, those words mean as much to me, probably more so today than they did 244 years ago. And despite, what we may think about those founders and their intentions, okay, that was then. But these words work for me now. And I value this, everything that it lays out. And so that's how we begin starting there, Miles, to reorient this conversation. Let's move off the talking points that the GOP want to put out there. Let's move off the crazy that comes out of Trump's mouth every time he gets in front of two people, right? That's irrelevant in one sense, because it's more of a distraction and it gets us down rabbit holes that take us away from the fundamentals of this document. And that's where I think we begin. And that's how I think you've seen the success that Ram has seen from Americans, because you're speaking to some core values that still resonates with them. And does that manifest itself into a third political party movement? We'll see. But right now, it's animating the conversation in a way that I think really pushes up against the January 6th narrative, the big lie, and the ongoing efforts legislatively across the country by certain political actors to rewrite the very fundamentals of this document.
Well, so that leads me, Michael, to a question about, the actual bills that are in front of Congress now on this, because, you and I are both lifelong Republicans,
right,
and I still consider myself a conservative, and I would like to see the people that I used to work with and for on Capitol Hill take up what I think is a fundamentally conservative issue, which is to protect this right to vote. For those watching, there are two really big bills in play. One's the Freedom to Vote Act, which has a whole range of measures, a common sense, middle of the road compromise bill between Democrats and some Republicans behind the scenes to really make it easier to register to vote. The things you were talking about, Chairman, easier to register to vote, protecting the integrity of the vote, standardizing voter ID, just kind of good government stuff that we conservatives would put into place. Then there's a second bill, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would reinstitute something called the pre-clearance requirement to make sure that states historically who disenfranchised voters have to check with the Justice Department first before they rewrite the rules. Those seem to me to be pretty common sense bills that, maybe a decade ago would have had a whole lot of Republican support. Right now, there's almost no Republican support. How do you account for that?
Well, I think, and I pulled up the bills while you were talking about them, because I think it's important. And there's a third one. There's the Protecting Our Democracy Act, which is another government reform bill. So we've come at the voting space from a number of angles. The essential one, sort of the granddaddy of them all, since renamed, is the Voting Rights Act, and has been renamed to the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And I think that, for example, taking that, if I were writing that bill, I would require pre-clearance of every state in the union. Everybody. You don't just to get the willy-nilly, because, this presumption that, this is a problem, with certain states coming out of the Jim Crow South. We've seen this issue now rise in places like, Ohio and elsewhere. It's not just something that, just because it's a blue state, for example, that there are no pre-clearance questions there. I think in order to begin to address some of the narratives and sometimes legitimate concerns from conservatives about this, then we look at this holistically. And we look at every state. We're all in the same fight for the rights under our Constitution as they are applied, and that doesn't give allowance or opportunity for one state to be free of some type of scrutiny versus what other states are. So I think the more you level the playing field, the greater the opportunity to lessen the noise around the activity. But the fact of the matter remains that because we have to do these other things, speaks to the reality that we're now confronting in many states. Some 40 plus states that have found a way to rewrite the rules. Now, some argument can be made, Miles, that okay, COVID changed the game. We made these adjustments during the COVID period where boards of elections no longer would require you to make a request for an absentee ballot. They would automatically send you the document to make that request. And some on the right have, had their hair on fire. Oh my God, that's cheating. Well, it's not giving you a ballot. It's just saying, here, if you want to make the request for the ballot, you still have to meet these other requirements and standards, et cetera. But here's the paperwork to do that. So I'm not put out by stuff like that, and neither should anyone else be, because no one's mailing you a ballot without your request. No one's sending you a ballot without required information beforehand. So I think part of this narrative now, which is where the work you're doing is so important, is to clear out the noise and the clutter. Let's say what it is, not get caught in the trap of what it isn't. And I think that when you're looking at the Freedom to Vote Act, everybody at this point, the ID question is just a canard, right? Look, folks, I don't care. The staunchest conservative in the universe, if he goes to the bank 10 minutes from now to cash a check, he ain't cashing that check, even if he's got $1 million in his bank account without an identification, a driver's license, government issued identification. So this notion by some conservatives that somehow requiring identification to vote is somehow is corruptive of the system is just bull. There are measures and means by which we can address that. The states and the feds need to stop playing politics here, get their act together, and have issue to everyone. If you want us to have an ID, If it's not going to require my driver's license, if it's going to require something else, then put that up there. All right, then pay for it. If you want me to have it, then pay for it. This idea that if I attend University X in city Y in state Z, that my student ID is not sufficient for purposes of voting, then give me the identification that I need. So there are ways in which we can work around some of the phony obstacles that have been put in place that address transparency, that address voter verification, etc., and allows greater access to the ballot box. That's what these measures are there to do. If I'm the Democrats, I would say this to them: would you stop trying to cram everything into one bill? Would you stop trying to create a piece of sausage that should be this size and stuffing it to be this size? Because it's not going to work. It just isn't going to work. Take what's given to you. Take what's available in front of you. You have right now an infrastructure bill that 19 Republicans have signed onto in the Senate. Mm-hmm. Pass it. Okay? Do that. The other will take care of itself. You get in the way. You see these parties, particularly in this case, the Democrats, getting in the way of successful opportunity. And making it harder on themselves. I get where the progressives are, but I'm sorry, there was no mandate by the American people for 90% of the stuff progressives are trying to stuff out there, stuff into the sausage right now. That's not saying that there won't be. It's just saying that right now there isn't. So just take what the American people are going to give you. The polls are telling you that, yeah, they may like all this stuff on childcare, but you don't have the votes for that. But take what you do have the votes for, what the American people also accept, and get the win. And then you can turn that win into a narrative for future wins. But right now, when you look at the landscape, whether it's on voting, whether it's on infrastructure, or any number of other issues, you find that they're not making the case for the American people. And the American people are looking back over at Republicans, even though they know that's not the date they want to go home with. That's not the date you don't want to go home with.
That's not the date. In fact, Chairman, I'm laughing when you say that. The other week, I was asked what the GOP looks like today, and I said it looked like Tinder, the dating app, Tinder for terrorists. And I got a lot of flack for that, but I stand by it because my comment was it's like you swipe right and you match with a new extremist politician on the right who validates your crazy views, and there's so many of them now that you don't want to take these folks on a date. They're
you don't spooky. Want your son or daughter to come home with that. You don't. I'm sorry, you just don't. You don't.
Well, you brought up something a little bit ago here, POTA. Right? The Protect Our Democracy Act. Now, if I had been a smart congressional staffer, I would have found a way to put a Y at the beginning. The Yoda bill would have gone a lot further. They love acronyms up there, but I guess we ended up with POTA. Another good common sense bill that I think is really interesting. This is the type of legislation that also a decade ago, you could have easily had, Paul Ryan and John Boehner introducing a bill like this to curtail executive overreach. I mean, we spent the whole Obama administration talking about, they were using executive orders too much and they were wielding the powers of the presidency in a way that was maybe, far too forward. And so you could have seen conservatives introduce a bill like this,
because let's be clear, executive overreach goes back to George Bush, 43, 9/11, post 9/11. So this is a space where we've watched that erosion of legislative authority by the executive branch. Look, it goes back to what I was just saying. If it's there and I can take it and you won't stop me, guess what I'm going to do?
You're going to take it. You're going to take it.
I'm going to take it. So don't bitch at me because I took it. You didn't stop me. So that's where something like POTA, which is, again, the Protect Our Democracy Act, which is a check on aggressive executive authority and power by the legislature, but also sort of reaffirms that very delicate partnership between the legislative and the executive branch. And you're absolutely right. Under an Obama administration, Republicans would have been falling all over themselves to promote POTA, and would have been making that case. But now they won't, and they're not, because it doesn't serve their political interest to do so, particularly if they taste the opportunity to reclaim the House, potentially Senate, and the White House in 2024. Why would they want that limitation in place if they're putting in place structures and trying to get people elected who will uphold the January 6th narrative?
Well, so then that leads me to a question, Governor, and that is, we've got several other advisors to Renew America that are shortly going to be putting out an opinion piece, all former Republican members of Congress urging their fellow Republicans to support these common sense bills. So former Congressman Reed Ribble, Jim Colby, Charles DeJew, and Claudine Schneider. They're going to come out there and say, former colleagues, you should support this legislation, especially because we've got a Democratic president. And like you noted, during the past Democratic administration, Obama, we would have happily put something like this into law. So how do we get those Republicans on board with these types of measures? And do you think it's even possible before the midterms in 2024? Or are we in total gridlock because of the specter hanging over the party right now?
I don't think you can. I don't think you will. And I appreciate, members of the RAM advisory, which I serve as well. Those congressional members doing this. I think it's a pin moment where you stick a pin in this moment, and that's what they're doing. But this leadership doesn't exist inside this Republican caucus. I think we just need to be honest and realistic about that. They stripped a good public servant in Liz Cheney of her leadership because she wouldn't stand in front of a country and lie to the country because the caucus wanted her to. You got to stand with the caucus. You got to uphold. Yeah, all right. So people go to jail for that stuff in real life, right? When you standing with your homies after you rob a store.
CEOs, board of directors.
Yeah. So you're going to take the whole snitching thing all the way to Congress, right?
Yeah.
Stop it. It's just stupid. And I think it's important to make the case, but I just don't see any Republicans currently serving that are going to in leadership. There'll be rank and file members, our buddy Adam Kinzinger and others who will stand up and say, yeah, what they said, we should be doing this and making their advocacy real. But they're not going to, who's going to back them up? Tim Scott, John Thune, who's going to back these guys up? Who's going to back up what these former members write? I mean, I don't see that kind of leadership emerging because everybody's sitting there betting on 2022, giving them back power when you don't deserve it. You deserve power when you show leadership. You deserve power when you show you can govern. You had 4 years to govern and you didn't do squat. I mean, except blame Democrats. And even then, for example, the last debt ceiling crisis, the Democrats said, "Okay, we'll give you the votes you need," even though Republicans were in the majority. Now you can't get Mitch McConnell to even free up the pathway for the Democrats to vote with the majority that they have to fix the debt ceiling. He's still saying, "Oh, you're going to need 60 votes." Well, where the hell am I going to get 10 Republicans? I mean, can we let's be logical about the crap that's going on right now. And everything, Miles, everything is political. Nothing's about people. Nothing's about families trying to make their ends meet every day. Nothing's about the fact that we're watching gas prices go up to the roof today. The market's reacting to this intransigence by Republicans, and Republicans are like, we don't care. Because they're looking at the American people and they're basically saying this: you are so stupid. We know you're going to vote for us next year. So it doesn't matter what we do. You're going to vote for us anyway because we're going to tell you not like the other guy. We're going to tell you how bad the other guys are. We're going to tell you how much debt they run. They want to raise the debt ceiling so they can spend more money. No, they want to raise the debt ceiling because of all the money you've already spent. The debt ceiling is not about paying for future bills. It's paying for the $8 trillion that Republicans spent in 4 years. So, that leadership isn't there. And I understand everyone's like, oh, well, maybe Republicans aren't playing that game. Republicans are playing one game only, and that's the game that's being dictated to them by two people, Mitch McConnell in the Senate and Donald Trump from wherever he is in Florida. That's it.
Well, that begs the question then. It's October. Is the U.S. House of Representatives a haunted house?
Unless there's a Ghostbuster that can go up there and clean that stuff up. Yeah.
I mean, and that's why another reason I find this to be just a really novel moment is here's two conservatives talking. And I think you and I probably both agree, Governor, that Kevin McCarthy, who's the, minority leader of the Republican Party in the House, doesn't deserve to be Speaker of the House.
No.
And that's our own party. We're saying our own team need to sit this one out because we haven't earned it, and nor do we deserve it.
No, and I just don't see what are they going to do? You give them okay. Republicans take the House in 2022. What do they do in 2023? I mean, Joe Biden. What happens to we've seen this movie. It was called. 4 years, 8 years of Obama. We've seen this play out before. I don't get what do you think is going to happen if you give Republicans the House next year? What do you actually think is going to get accomplished? Divided government? That's bull. It's not divided government. It's do nothing government. There's nothing divided here. It's not like, you've got philosophical differences between this party and that party, and that's going to force them now to have to come to a consensus on how to deal with, I don't know, pick an issue. No, that's not what this is about. This is about power. Who has it, who asserts it, and on how much we can own the libs and how much we can make them pay. Members of our party are more fixated on the fashion wear of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez than they are about putting forth a sound infrastructure bill or putting forth a sound healthcare bill or putting forth a sound border immigration bill other than build the wall and, look at all these black and brown people coming across the border that we don't want in our country. That's our policy. So I don't know what people have to ask themselves. What do you think is going to happen? Let's say, God forbid, there's a vacancy on the Supreme Court. One of the liberal justices retires or God intervenes in some way. What do you think happens there? And Lord knows what happens if one of the conservative justices, for God forbid, has to step down. And Joe Biden gets to put on his choice to take a conservative seat. What the hell do you think will happen? Come on, y'all need to wake up because y'all not even playing a good game of chess right now, up against what the Republicans are doing. And I don't know. I just get beside myself because you see it, Miles. You're sitting there and you're like, wow, no one can really see this? Where do you think this goes?
Well, and I'd be remiss if I didn't go to the big boogeyman here. I mean, you talk about finding a Ghostbuster. Well, then the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man has got orange hair. And my question for you is, look, a lot of people thought in 2020 that was it. Donald Trump got beat. It clearly wasn't it. He's still in the game. As recently as days ago, Chairman, he signaled that he'll be running in 2024. There was a news report that his advisors had to talk him out of announcing in August because it was 3 years too early or whatever it was. So, if he continues to be the specter hanging over all of this, how do we really defeat Trumpism and just move on to something better?
You're not. No, you just, it's not a question of, it's a number of things that I think that people have to gear up the will to engage in. A lot of people, to your first point, thought, oh, okay, wow, okay, Donald Trump got unelected. All right, and what happened? What happened after that? Did the election just quietly end? Did it just go away? Did we have a smooth transfer of power? No. He told us back in May of 2020, oh, if I don't win this election, it's rigged. He told you what he was going to do. So one thing I keep telling people about Donald Trump, he can't help himself. A man who has an ego and is so full of himself to the degree that he is, he can't keep it contained. You just made the point. His advisors are like, no, don't make any announcement now, because he actually believes the momentum is with him. Mm-hmm. That the American people, so he's getting cockier and cocky, and there's nothing worse than someone who's a megalomaniac who gets even more megalomaniacal. All right?
10 times faster.
There you go. Not happening. Not happening. But you get the point. So the reality of it is, we're in it, people. And this is the difference maker. Pick a page, read it. Right? That's the difference maker. Because that's how you push back against this. We are on a very treacherous slope. Look, does Donald Trump run again in 2024? My bet still is no. And there are a lot of reasons why I say that. But what Donald Trump will do between now and when he finally says, no, I'm not doing this, is that he will so screw up the system and so twist it into knots, and so getting people believe he is, and they're going to fire up all these passions to draw these people out and raise all this money for him. Donald Trump ain't writing a check to nobody else's campaign. All these people he's out here endorsing, asking how much money has Donald Trump sent them over the $250+ million he's got sitting in his PAC. How much have they received? Mm-hmm. And what's he doing to help them besides saying, hey, I'm endorsing you, right? So that's one piece. The other piece is, as long as he can churn that water, it's going to bring in cash. It's going to keep his name. Look, he doesn't need Twitter anymore. We're sitting here talking about him. Mm-hmm. What does he need Twitter for? We have effectively become his Twitter feed, in that, we're going to talk about, when I keep telling folks at MSNBC where I work, stop it. It's not worth it, because you're playing his game. Mm-hmm. He left, and what did he tell us when he leave? Oh, you guys want me too much. You're not going to stop talking about me. He's right. So he's figured out and knows how this plays itself. And he will continue to try to manipulate it to his own end, which makes it hard. It goes back to what we were saying before. It will require individuals inside the GOP saying, you know what? I can't handle this high anymore. This party was supposed to have only been a weekend. We're now into 4 months. I can't, it literally is like going to a party on a Friday night and waking up the following weekend, you're still there partying. And you're like, I gotta go to work.
America's worst hangover in history. Just the most horrible hangover. So what do we, when Renew America releases our watch list this month, we're going to lay out the House candidates that we consider renewers, right, including good Republicans that we want to protect and good moderate Democrats. Is that the way to turn the ship in this fight, is electorally? I mean, people like Trump only speak one language, winners and losers. Is it going to mean, there's a lot of pro-democracy groups out there, a lot of activity, but really is it going to come down to kicking the bad ones out of office and protecting the good ones? And if so, what's your prognosis there?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It is about winners and losers, and you've got to create some winners. You've got to create winners from those who are presumed to be losers under Trump. In other words, people that he will go after, that he's going to endorse their opposition. The party is going to censor those individual members, regardless of the office they're in. Need to be protected, need to be supported for sure. So protecting assets you have. Part of the price, though, that should come with that is, well, we're not just protecting you just to go along to get along. We're protecting you because we need you to step into your leadership. We're protecting you because we need your voice to be more than, right? We need more than that. We need you to stand in front of a bank of microphones and speak very loudly and clearly about why this democracy moment matters and what you're willing to sacrifice for it. And then that becomes self-reinforcing, that becomes self-fulfilling in the sense that the mission that RAM, Renew America movement, and others have out there not only gain in terms of momentum, but relevance and importance. And people, they become part of the connective tissue in this new era of democracy. Just because we've started to slide down doesn't mean that we flatline. No, you, me, Ribble, Cheney, we're defibrillators, right? We are. We are individual defibrillators on both the country and the party. And we're here to shock the hell out of you. It reminds me of that scene from Moonstruck where Cher slaps the crap out of her co-star and says, snap out of it. That's what we are. That's what you, me, and others are at this moment. We have to be. Because if we don't, we succumb. And if we succumb, then we become, in the history books, another experiment that failed. And they will write of this great land what they've written of the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, and so many others that have gone before that have tried to fashion some democratic ideal, but succumb to its own internal pressures.
Well, then a final question for you, Chairman, and that would be, what cause for hope do we have in this fight and in this struggle? You've been on the front lines. You've been incredibly courageous as a former leader of the party and a former lieutenant governor to be out there so publicly saying we need to get our shit together. The GOP needs to get its shit together, and that disaffected voters should join into that fight. What cause is there for optimism in the struggle in the long run based on what you've seen on the front lines?
Okay, so I'm going to give you, I've got two things for you to answer that. Our Declaration of Independence starts with these words: when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We need to separate ourselves from what we see happening right now. We need to declare ourselves in the course of these human events to be free of fascism, white nationalism, and the kind of fake populism, the dangerous populism that has so poisoned the economy of our politics. The next come from the Constitution itself, and these for me are the three most powerful words of all the documents written: we the people. Because that's the essence of it. We the people declare ourselves free of this, that this does not represent the better angels of this great nation. We have our flaws. We're not discounting that. We have our challenges. We know our history has been tarnished with the original sin of slavery and the ongoing repression of segregation and the maltreatment of others. We know that, but we've always strived to overcome. That's why that Negro spiritual, "we shall overcome someday," is so important, not just in the 1960s moment, but in that initial moment when we declared our independence. That's essentially what we were saying. We shall overcome the chains and the things that bind us to King George. We shall overcome the things that bind us at this moment to Donald Trump and Trumpism. And so that's where my host rests. It rests in we the people, recognizing that in order for us to form that more perfect union, we're going to have to do some things. We're going to have to engage in a way that we haven't before. We've gotten a little bit lazy and a little bit sort of laid back since the greatest generation saved us from Hitlerism and Nazism and world domination. From the underbelly of the globe at that time, right? Imagine if our grandparents and even our parents had said, "It'll work out, it'll be fine. It's just a guy with a funny mustache. Come on, what's the worst that can happen? We don't need to be involved." Remember, that was the initial attitude of a lot of Americans. There were a lot of Americans who were pro-Nazi, until they were made to understand what it meant, until they were made to confront what it does to any democratic society. So I think for me, that's where our hope lies. And I'm still hopeful the American people will take the words of our independence and the words of our Constitution to heart when we declare that we, the people, in the course of these human events, will set ourselves free.
Well, Michael Steele, a powerful note to end on. You, sir, are always interesting, incisive, and inspiring. And I know this isn't in your plans, but if you so happen to end up on the debate stage in the Republican primaries in 2024 for the presidency, we're going to be cheering you on, and we hope that you can take out some of these bad cats. But in the meantime, we in America look forward to what's next for you, sir. So thanks for joining us. Michael, final word for you, and then over to Mariana.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And if I'm on that stage, all hell's about to break loose.
That's why I'm fired up about it.
I will not go quietly into that good night. That's for damn sure. But no, I appreciate the chance to have a conversation. Continue the good work, and I'm honored to be a part of it in however ways you need me to be. And I encourage my fellow Americans to look seriously at the work and the efforts of Renew America and get on board the effort to help our democracy, not just save it. Because even when you save something, you still need to help it because you got to keep moving forward. So there's a lot of good work ahead.
Amen. Governor, thank you. Mariana, take us home.
Thank you, Miles and Lieutenant Governor Steele, for an incredible conversation on how we can protect American democracy in 2022 and beyond. Similar to yourself, Lieutenant Governor, I also am clutching my Declaration of Independence and Constitution quite tightly these days. Nevertheless, I thank everyone who has joined us today. And if you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, you're going to love our next Ram Chat. I will have the opportunity to sit down with Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan. I hear he's quite the peach. Pun intended. Lieutenant Governor Duncan will join me and Miles to discuss his latest book, GOP 2.0, and I hope that you will join us on Wednesday, October 26th at 2 p.m. for a Ram Chat with Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. In the meantime, to stay up to date with everything Renew America is doing, to keep an eye out for our watch list, please find us online at renewamericamovement.com, as well as on YouTube at youtube.com/renewamericamovement, and follow us on Twitter at Renew America Movement. Have a fantastic rest of your week. We'll chat soon.